Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our community check-in on cultural spaces. I think as things open back up and reviewing how much things have changed over the past year, we wanted to bring you all together for a chance to learn more about how cultural facilities have been responsive to changes happening in local communities, especially during this time. I want to let everyone know that we have closed captioning services turned on for the Zoom webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions or comments during the check-in, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and a staff member on our team will respond or send them to our panelists. The chat box function will be used for people to put in links or anything else that may be useful for attendees. So we're very excited to have you all join us today for this conversation. This is our last community check-in for the fiscal year. We're starting back up in July 1st, but we will be moving our community check-ins to a quarterly schedule moving forward. To better introduce myself, my name is Timothea Pham, and I am a program officer in the community initiative team at the Mass Cultural Council. Today, I'm calling in from East Somerville, Massachusetts, which was originally the land of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket people. I am a Vietnamese American woman with wavy long, medium to dark brown hair, medium tan skin, and I am wearing a black shirt with a gray knit sweater over it. And my pronouns are she and hers. I am here today with our wonderful panelists, whom I will introduce shortly, and our teammates. So as you may or may not know, this is our community initiative team. We have Lisa Simmons, who's our community initiative program manager. Again, the community initiative at Mass Cultural is made up of the local cultural council, festival, and cultural districts program. We have Luis Cotto, who is our cultural districts program manager. We have Mina Kim, who is a program officer, myself, Timothea Pham, Ricardo Guillaume, and Veronica Ramirez Martel. This is also a map that you can find on our main website. It is color-coded to show which regions we specifically work in. You can see the pink areas are also cultural districts. So if you ever feel the need to find out what's happening in your regions, definitely connect with the community staff. So for the agenda for today, after this introduction, we're going to be joined by Quach, who is the Director of Engagement and Organizing at MASSCreative. He's going to be giving an overview of MASSCreative updates, but also talking a tiny bit about how MASSCreative has engaged with conversations around cultural facilities. Then we have Jay Paget, who's the Program Director, and Miranda Cook, Program Officer for the Cultural Facilities Fund at Mass Cultural. They're going to be talking a little bit about the CFF grant program and some interesting findings that they've discovered over this period, which will be really exciting. Then we are joined by Nina Berg, who's the Creative Director at Central Square Bid, and Matthew Boyes Watson, who's the partner at Flagg Street Studio. They're going to be talking a little bit about Starlight Square, and it's a very interesting space in the heart of Central Square Cultural District, and just the opportunities that that type of space has provided, on top of some other things as well. And then we have Jill Sackett, who is the chair of the Winchendon Cultural Council. She's going to be giving us, a bit of an overview about Winchendon, the town's new master plan, and specifically from the perspective of a local cultural council, how they've been able to work with the town to possibly activate cultural facilities in the near future, which is really exciting. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, if you have any questions, definitely feel free to put those in the Q&A. And if you have anything broader to share, you can put that in the chat as well. But we'll be able to pass those questions along to our panelists and staff during the time. So right now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chi to talk about some MASSCreative updates.
Hello, everyone. I'm G from MASSCreative. Trying to remember He series coming from the lands of, I'm terrified of saying certain names because I do not do a good job with them. My apologies. But Massachusetts and Pawtucket, I think. Sorry, my fault. And I am Asian male with a shaved head wearing a gray t-shirt. Okay, so A lot of the information I'm going to share with you very quickly is shared through our bi-weekly webinars, and I'm going to drop that into the link. If you ever want sort of consistent stream of news related to arts policy, please join us and you can register there. But just to give you a quick update on all the things on the table, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA for short, money is coming to Massachusetts. And a lot of that is going to be going to local counties, but they're not assigned for anything specific, which means this is a good time to reach out to your local lawmakers and to say, hey, we want to make sure you use some of that money for the arts. So please keep that in mind. Another piece of legislation specific to Massachusetts that's happening right now is the American Rescue Plan, which is asking the Massachusetts legislature to put aside $200 million for the recovery of the creative sector. Right now, we have 25% of the House who've endorsed it and 43% of the Senate who've endorsed it. So once again, this is about advocacy. Reach out to your lawmakers and say, this is something you really support, and ask them to sign on to the American Rescue Plan Act if they haven't already. Last piece of ongoing legislative business is the fiscal year 22 budget. Both the House and State Senate has proposed 20 million for the arts. And so that's in line with what was asked. So maybe a thank you would be nice. And just to sort of acknowledge that it's great that you guys are already listening to what we need without us having to scream and yell about it. So those are ongoing legislation on the table. In terms of other organizing work MassCreative is doing, we just released our policy platform. Create the Vote Boston is a coalition of arts networks around Boston that is trying to raise art as a priority for all the mayoral candidates. As many of you already know, Walsh went to Washington, and so there is an open field for the next mayor, and we wanted to engage them in the conversation about arts. We have already had roundtables with candidates, and 5 of the 6 candidates we're already in conversations with in terms of setting up those roundtables. Our policy platform, which went up on Monday, can be found here. And it's a collection of priorities for the whole of the creative sector in Boston. So it's a pretty dense document, and it's not even fully, not everything can be in there. So please take a look at that. And if you are willing to, either as part of your organization or as an individual, sign on to support and endorse it to show that arts in Boston is a priority for many people. I know I'm running out of time, so I want to touch really quickly on the topic of space. So space is complicated because it intersects with so many other advocacy fields. And so MassCreative is taking the approach of moving it not from the silo of the priority from the art, but how is it interconnected to other community constituents. So for example, we've supported and spoke with Somerville, who has talking about how do they shape the city they want to see that prioritizes art in terms of zoning for maker spaces. I think many people don't understand that you can shape how and what kind of city you want to have, and policies can help with that process. So say designating a building as a maker space prevents more luxury condos from being built, because maybe a community would prefer more art spaces than more luxury condos. Another example is MassCreative is a partner in the Cultural Equity Incubator, which is sharing a space with 10 nonprofit art orgs, smaller nonprofit art orgs. But it's not just sharing space. It's not just like you get a room, you get a room, you get a room. It's we all are sharing this room. how are we going to do it together? And so these models are sort of rethinking how do we make the most out of, we know space is limited, especially in Boston and certain cities. Is not, the solution is not everybody gets a space, is how do we use the space that exists more equitably? I'm going to stop there because we could go on forever.
Great, thank you so much, Chi. So right now, after, if you do have any specific questions for G, definitely put it in the Q&A and we'll definitely be able to forward it to him. But we have up next Jay Paget and Miranda Cook from our Cultural Facilities team.
Thanks, Timothea. My name is Jay Paget, the pronouns he, him. Live in Hyde Park, Mass, which was Massachusetts land. I'm a middle-aged Irish descent Caucasian male with a full head of hair, although it's multicolored right now, partially gray, partially L'Oreal number 7. So anyway, we're here to talk to you about the Cultural Facilities Fund. That's a fund for planning and fixing and building and maintaining cultural facilities in Massachusetts. We've been doing this for about 13 rounds of funding. And I can show you some slides and we can talk about them as well. And we can field some questions. So you just get a baseline of how to access the program, which will have a round coming up in October of this year. So Miranda's going to share the screen and we'll do a quick 5-minute run through. And then we'll also try to talk about artist space as well, which is a little bit different, given facilities fund just in general is more for where you and I would take a class, where you and I would go to a performance, or you and I would learn something educationally at a facility, a historic home, a museum, a theater, or a community arts center. And sometimes where the work gets made is a different space, and we do some work in that area as well. So we'll go through this slideshow. And so we have some goals, and the goals probably center more than anything around planning for the inevitable. And the inevitable in this case is the ongoing maintenance of buildings, which as many of you know, just you always sort of have a list of things you need to take care of in the building. So we try to position organizations so they can anticipate what they're going to need and how much that's going to cost, so that they can kind of anticipate and budget for it. All of our grants are one-to-one match. So there's an incentive here whereby we're putting public dollars on the table, and we hope that kind of leverages some private giving. So it's a one-to-one match. And then generally the stewardship is a term we use for just sort of the overall care and feeding of a place over time, so that you can continue doing that among all the other great things you do with programming. So the eligible entities are nonprofit cultural organizations with a 501c3 designation that are primarily concerned with the arts, humanities, and/or interpretive sciences. Municipalities can apply so long as the building is predominantly used for arts and culture, and the building can either be over 50,000 square feet or over 125 years old. And then the final category is colleges and universities, provided that the facility is open to the public on a regular basis and is not really just centered on the educational mission with students. So we have 3 types of grants. We have the capital grant, which just means implementation, what you would pay for construction or, changing the roof or, buying a new boiler. And next we have feasibility and technical assistance, which is just another term for using planning consultants to get you the information you need in order to do the construction. And then what we call a systems replacement plan, other people call a capital needs assessment. It is basically an inspection of the building whereby you get a plan going forward for 20 years that lets you know, in all likelihood, you're going to need to replace these systems or repair the roof at this, in this many years from now, and it will cost this much. So those are the three types of grants we have. And I'll go into them just quickly in a little more detail of how you can use the money. So the capital grant's really flexible. You can use this to acquire a building or acquire a site. You can pay for the basic renovations and repairs. You can build a new building, new construction, or substantial rehab of an existing building. We also include in the capital grant some of the final stage design aspects of architects and engineers, since on the larger facilities, that can be a pretty hefty price tag. And then we can also purchase major integrated equipment so long as that equipment is fixed to the building. So that's some of the ways you can use a capital grant. Like I said, it's fairly flexible, and I think it covers most of the types of things an organization would need to buy things for the building or to fix the building itself. And then we get into the planning grant, and sort of the three areas we see here is a lot of times organizations they're working with the people who design the physical space. So that would be the architects and the engineers, and there's other specialists of, you could have ADA compliant people, you could have acousticians to do the sound, or historic, renovation consultants as you work with historic buildings, but it's mostly dealing with the physical aspects and what you can and should do for the building. The other are sort of, the second was more informational. That would be a plan to do something new and different. So for example, if we're opening a community arts center, and you had to acquire a building or lease a building, and then you had to program it, staff it, and operate it, you would need some kind of an analysis of what that takes, what kind of resources that takes. So we can help you with resources to think through that. So that's what the planning grant can do as well. So, and then the third is really how are you going to pay for it? So a lot of times organizations will do a capital campaign feasibility study, and they will try to assess the approach to raising sometimes a large amount of money, and we can help with that. And then the final one is the systems replacement plan. And like mentioned before, this is going to give you, someone's going to come out and look at the building, poke around, and ask you a lot of questions, and they're going to forecast what the replacement is of the physical aspects of the building, the roof, the foundation, and then the mechanical systems, the HVAC and the electrical and the boiler and things like that. So they can give you a really detailed inspection report, and then what it would take to replace those over time. And they also trended for inflation, so that like in year 12, if you need to replace the boiler, it may be 15% more than today's dollars. So it's a nice tool for an organization to have, because that document can sometimes stay there while staff changes, so that the information and knowledge doesn't leave the organization. It stays there even though there may be staff changes. And I didn't really get in, I think I covered this, the types of things that will be assessed. And you can apply for the systems replacement plan. You can apply with any of the other two. So you can apply for the SRP, as we call it, with the capital grant or the planning grant. But with the capital and planning, you have to pick one or the other, and just come in for one request. And we run an annual round. And like I said, I think the next round will come October of this year. It's a 1-to-1 match, and you can match from typically philanthropic sources, public sources other than the state of Massachusetts, and then private giving as well. So that's some contact information. We can be easily found on the web, Miranda and I. And how are we doing on time, Timothy? Are we good, or do we have a minute to?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, I think maybe we can wait until after the panelists and then we can revisit that conversation about the artist space. But thank you so much, Jay and Miranda, for that. So I think, yeah, just for timing's sake, we're going to move on to Matt and Nina talking about Starlight Square.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nina Berg. I'm the creative director at the Central Square Business Improvement District in the Cultural District of Central Square in Cambridge. And this is
Matthew Boyes Watson. I'm a born and raised Cambridge person and one of the principals at Flagg Street Studio, which helped with the design and installation of Starlight.
So we're going to start with a short video. For those who aren't familiar with the project, it's the best way to get a sense of the space. And then we'll kind of share about our experience creating a cultural space, because that's kind of our experience. So let me pull that up. And if you don't mind giving a thumbs up if you can see this. Okay, thanks, Jay. So this was from our opening day. You might recognize Luis in the crowd, which was about a month ago. So we're in our second season at Starlight, and we'll give you the context in just a couple minutes. Okay, so that is our video from this season. And how did we get there, I guess, is the question. So like Matthew said, well, he didn't say, but both of us grew up in Central Square and attended public school, elementary school, and high school in Cambridge. So I think a lot of people ask, well, why are you involved in this project? And the answer is that we grew up in this neighborhood and love this neighborhood and have watched it change for our entire lives. And after coming back from college, for me, 10 years ago now, started to try to figure out how do you participate in how your city evolves. And when it starts to change, how do you participate in having an opinion and stewarding that change. And my job currently at the Central Square Bid, and we're standing in for Michael Monestein, who's the executive director of the Bid, has been to create this organization in the last year and a half that really is helping steward what happens in the cultural district in partnership with the city of Cambridge, the small business community, the arts and cultural organizations, and the residents. So we were a brand new organization in October of 2019, and quickly were thrust, like all of us, into the COVID-19 reality and had to think very quickly about how we were going to transition everything that makes up a cultural district outside. And so we Matthew and I had been thinking about what is missing in Central Square for our entire lives. And his father, who's an architect, also had been thinking about that for most of his professional career. And our idea was to create a square in the square, a civic space that could kind of hold the life force of a cultural district. And pre-COVID, we had identified Lot 5, which is a municipally owned parking lot, as a site to test this idea. And this was pre-COVID, and we'd gone to the city with this proposal March 9th, so days before the state of emergency was declared. They were very receptive. We had the approval of all of the relevant city departments. And then, of course, everything was rescinded because of COVID. And we had to go back to them with this idea that was like, hey, it's actually even more important now to do an intervention like this, given how much is at stake. So this is what we started with. This is Municipal Lot 5. It's behind H Mart, what was formerly Blockbuster. It is not a lot to work with, but I think we've said our line is that, well, a parking lot for cars could be a place for people. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the kind of design that got us here.
Yeah, so the challenge was to frame a space, particularly for COVID, that would be safe for gathering and continuing to do the essential things that happen in the cultural district, centering worship, art, performance, and civic gathering in a way that's safe. And so the creation of an open air community venue was our priority. And we used scaffolding and scrim to frame the space, all temporary reversible materials, which is what we were permitted to use on the lot, and that are relatively inexpensive to put up and take down. And from a design perspective, we were really excited by the opportunity to create fake buildings, which is what the scaffolding and the scrim does. Because I know probably everybody on this call has been told oftentimes art and culture is pushed into the unwanted spaces because it is the inexpensive spaces. But those spaces are often inhospitable energetically to gathering and art and culture and performance. So we tried to use temporary and reversible materials, in this case, scaffolding and scrim. And the install period is 14 days to put up a space, to frame a space that could hold all the things that needed a safe space to exist, especially during COVID. And that was the priority for season 1.
So we also, scrim was a really exciting material for us because it also acted as a canvas. So the entire exterior of Starlight is covered in public art. In the upper left, you have a mural that was created by the Community Arts Center, which is a tribute to Breonna Taylor. On the Bishop Allen Drive side, there's a collage of photography from Black Lives Matter movement protests around the country. And this was going up about this time last summer. So we acknowledged that these were the conversations that were happening in Central Square in the cultural district. And so the space very much reflects what was happening in Cambridge at the time. This was a digital piece illustration by Dosa Las, a Miami-based artist. And down here on the bottom right is a beautiful photo of 3 generations of the Moses family. Which they are a kind of elemental fixture in Cambridge for their work in civil rights movement and as educators and community members. So this was also part of our kind of space creation, was how do you frame the space and then how do you use it to also reflect back the conversations of the community. In season 1, we, like Matt said, we kind of had to create a place that held everything that was kind of displaced by COVID We had workforce development programs. These are some of the kids who work with us, high school students who work with us as the site was being built. Some of the anchor institutions in Central Square did programming. This is the dance complex, Central Square Theater, and we had kind of interfaith church services, worship services, healing gatherings also occupy the space. And that's just a small sampling of what happened 6 nights a week at Starlight. So in the first season, there were 133 safe shared experiences. We had to develop standard operating procedures for the space and make sure we weren't putting anyone at risk. We fundraised, or the Central Square bid fundraised to create this space, to make it free to attend and to pay artists. We worked with 29 programming partners citywide, commissioned 6 pieces of public art, and as I mentioned, it was all free to the community. And part of the stipulation from the city when we entered the license agreement with them was that this had to be operational all year. So we had originally kind of programmed a season outside through the fall when it's still nice to be outside in New England. And then we were extended through the winter and had to kind of think quickly about what would happen then. So we continued working with Flagg to layer on these uses at Starlight. So we added opportunity.
So where the original installation was designed to center the cultural and community institutions and be a lifeline for them during COVID, as we headed into the fall and as COVID became very clear the crisis was going to continue, we started to center the small business community, artists and retailers and makers who were functionally decimated by the cancellation of all the vending opportunities that they rely on, primarily around the holiday season where 60 to 80% of their income comes from. So we created Popportunity, which is an economic development program. We rented storage units from U-Haul, pictured in the back here, and retrofitted them into small stores. And hosted a pop-up market every weekend with vendors from the community, 16 different vendors from the community, all retailers. And it was incredibly successful and really fun. And these folks continued as pictured all winter long. The holiday market also had some larger market events mixed in. So in total, 70 vendors participated. We did just under $90,000 in the 6 market days for the holidays. And then our vendors were primarily female, primarily people of color, and primarily from Cambridge. So really awesome, vibrant community of makers, retailers, and small business owners who didn't have a place to vend and to participate in the opportunity of the city. So we were really excited to be able to take city-owned land in the form of the parking lot and make that space something that works for them.
That got us through 2020. As we were centering arts and cultural organizations and the small business community, there was just so much need, as we all know, given the pandemic. So in the winter, we also hosted mutual aid, food distribution, gift drives. We brought back the Central Square Farmers Market, and continued to create hold space for the community services that people were relying on to continue safely. Then as we got a little warmer, we did a refresh of Popportunity, which was much needed. It got beaten up in the winter. And we brought on one of our high school Ringe classmates, Manushka Lord, who manages the Popportunity program. and expanded it to include food and beverage, create a patio, and really think about what are the complementary uses that can work alongside arts and cultural performance, and basically have spun up our own little economy here on this parking lot. So in addition to the pods that Matthew was just talking about, we have a bunch of these kind of smaller single day carts. People can pop up for the day. The mayor, also a high school classmate, holds her office hours outside. Her constituents still feel most comfortable meeting her in fresh air, open air. And we don't have a photo of them, which is my bad, of Comfort Kitchen, who is our partner for Opportunity, and they've been running their kind of snack menu, out of 3 of these Opportunity pods. And we're really excited for them to now be able to continue their plans to open their restaurant. But this was a bridge for them when those plans got disrupted by COVID. And as that video showed, we're in our 2nd season now. It has been a beautiful thing to see the space fill up with people. We were operating with really strict capacity restrictions last year, and know that those have been lifted. You can have 140 people in this space, and it feels really nice. Some highlights for us. Last Friday, we had Shebu and Swerve take over Starlight for a roller skating party, which was amazing. July 23rd, they're back, so please come by and lace up your skates. And probably, I don't know if we'll ever beat this, but we hosted this CRLS high school prom, which was amazing for the senior class to get together after having not been together for a year plus. And this prom was graced by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who was doing a tour of the cultural district and made Starlight a stop on her trip. So that's what we have been doing for the last 16 months in Central Square. In addition to Starlight and Opportunity, we worked with the city again to add 500 new outdoor dining seats district-wide, which is kind of in the same line of thinking of reclaiming parking and roadway for people and for community use. So that is what we're doing. Do you have anything else to add?
No, and we're probably right at time, but just it's been really amazing to watch once the city, who was a fantastic partner, and allowed the lot to be used in favor of culture and community, how flexibly, nimbly, and widely it was able to respond to the needs of the community through crisis and then graduating out of it, and to center a really diverse a set of needs very flexibly, where previously it held 90 parking spots.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you. So we do have a quick question from someone named Wiley Goodman. What were the winter store structures made from? Were they retrofitted, and what are the dimensions of the parking lot?
So the Opportunity pods, if you Google U-Haul U-boxes, you'll find exactly what they are. They were retrofitted with ice and rain shields, so weatherized ever so slightly. And we did have power for lighting, but other than that, there was no heating element. So it was a cold winter. And pro tip: if you wrap your feet in saran wrap before you put your socks on, it makes a big difference from an insulation perspective. So we learned that as well. And then the lot's about 2/3 of an acre, and I don't have off the top of my head what the dimensions are, but I'll grab that and put it in the chat or DM me with it.
Perfect. And then we do have one more quick question from Greg Jenkins. So could you mention more about the budget for the build out and available budget for ongoing programming, and where is this money coming from?
Great question. So the Central Square Bin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, basically a lot of the upfront costs came out of our operating budget and were fundraised by our executive director through sponsors and partners. We've worked closely with the Cambridge Community Foundation, other local foundations, the Wagner Foundation, to kind of cobble together the money that it would take to create the space. And then the city of Cambridge allocated, I believe it was $250,000 last year to underwrite the performances and to make it free, because we are not allowed to charge any money for admission or for use of the pods. So the bid doesn't generate any revenue from any of these projects. So I hope that's helpful. The majority has been fundraised by the nonprofit.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing just how creative you can think about just public space and just providing opportunities for relief especially. So next up, we're going to have Jill Sackett, who is the chair of the Winchendon Cultural Council.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. Yes. All right, thank you very much for inviting me. I am Jill Sackett, pronouns she, her. I'm a middle-aged female, brown hair, with a very floral top today. And I'm really pleased to be bringing a real shift here in the discussion, as I am pretty far west and in a very, very small town with a very different set of challenges out here. But I'm here today to talk about the community master plan of Winchendon, which has been several years in the rewrite. And what was unique about it this time around is that it specifically folded in assignments to the local cultural council here. And even more specifically with regard to using spaces here in town. So I'm going to go quickly through these since we're a little short on time. Our community is Worcester County, North Central Mass, incorporated in 1764, where we're, like many, a very old mill town with a history of woodcrafts, textile industry. We were the world headquarters of Converse Toys, hence giving us the name Toy Town, which is still used today. Our population is about 9,000. We're bisected by two medium-sized highways, Route 12 and Route 202. We went through quite an economic decline after the demise of all of the industrial age business we had here. We are currently reinventing ourselves through agri-economy, recreation, and culture. Our community vision, which I'll just briefly go through here, basically is leveraging our extensive rural beauty out here, a lot of open space and farms, our heritage of our craftsmanship and entrepreneurship. We're a small town, so we have a very small town atmosphere and engagement and community engagement, and our abundant recreational opportunities and natural beauty. We'll go on to the master plan. The master plan is quite ambitious for a town of our size. It has been published, it has been finalized, it has 9 chapters, multiple goals within those chapters, and within those goals, 151 strategies or tactics distributed across them. There's a link there, and I can put that in the chat if you like, if anybody cares to go read the entire document. But that is our master plan. We're very excited about it, but it just rolled out as COVID was starting to diminish here. So we haven't had a lot of activity on it yet. Although the master plan does have listed and is identifiable players. We have an implementation committee that's in the process of being assembled, 7 members to oversee the implementation and progress. We have our stakeholders, our residences, businesses, and nonprofits. Not only will they benefit, but they are also a source of potential volunteering to help execute this. We, as a small town, have an extremely limited budget, and much of what we do will have to rely on community volunteerism to get it done. We do have town departments, some paid employees that will be given some of the lead and contributor assignments to get some of those done. And we have town boards and committees, which are elected or approved appointed volunteers. And they also have lead and contributor assignments. And among those is the Cultural Council. And I am the chair of the Cultural Council. So I was very excited to see us get folded in. We have several contributor assignments, but we have 3 main ones. And they fall under the chapter of Historic and Cultural Resources and a chapter of Economic Development. And they were purposefully rather broadly written, basically to promote our existing historic and cultural assets, focusing on modern day events that focus on invention and creativity, using our assets, our buildings for our events, and then to increase the value potential of Winchendon's people, its labor force, business and owners and entrepreneurs. We have a ton of cottage industry out here. Lots of people crafting and being creative and jumping into, you know, any venues they can for displaying their wares. Hence your, Nina, your pop-up, your popportunity, I wrote that down. That was a pretty cool concept. I'm going to think about that. So how do you execute something like this? The basic approach that we've talked about is to kind of make room for proactive funding, more proactive funding. Our cultural council out here historically has been more reactive. You know, folks come to us, they give us applications, we review those applications. A lot of them are performance events of various sorts, and we fund those things as a, you know, accordingly. We wanted to be more proactive and more forward looking on what kinds of things we want to fund that will help fit the master plan assignments. Partnerships, doing more to work with other organizations, particularly nonprofits or other active organizations in towns in the arts and creativity to get some things done. There isn't a lot of stuff for youth out here. Very few, aside from scouts and school clubs. So we are looking for more ways to engage our youth. We're going to inventory our historic buildings. We're going to leverage our existing programs and assets. And then we want to consider a council funded project, which is something that this council has not done historically. First thing we did, which the timing just happened to work out very well, was a Seeds of Hope community art initiative. We have a nonprofit, a new nonprofit in town called Heal Winchendon, basically working on food insecurity, empowerment, financial empowerment and independence, and racial diversity and recognition. So Heal Winchendon ran a program this spring called Seeds of Hope, and it was a street banner contest. Both youth and adult could submit entries for art. The art was displayed in a local art gallery. Winning entries made it into street banners, which will be hung around town. We partially funded that this year, and rather significantly partially funded that this year. But it addressed all 3 assignments that you saw on the prior slide about promoting entrepreneurial, creative, modern day creativity, and using local venues, because the event was actually hosted at a art gallery here in town. It was an old converted barn. The Gardner Area League of Artists, or GALA, opened up their art gallery as a backdrop for this event. It was a beautiful day, so we had a lot of outdoor activity going on around it. This was the day of the event. It was held a couple weeks ago here in June, and lots and lots of kudos for it and success, and people were very glad that took place. Next up is we looked at an inventory of some of our assets. And, you know, most any old towns, when you go around and look around your place, there's a lot of amazing places in town. A couple of these are already used for various functions, and a couple are not for public functions. So you have up here our town hall on the upper left here, the red brick building. It actually houses a beautiful old auditorium with a stage that is simply not used at all as an auditorium with a stage. Town meetings are held in there. Board of Selectmen meetings are held in there, and that's it. On the upper right, you see one of our historic homes in town, right on Front Street, and it is now housing the Winchendon History and Cultural Center. Massive porch, big parlor. Down below it is the original first church in town, Old Center Church. Below that is the interior of our Catholic church. The middle picture is our public library, and the lower left picture is an 1866 granite church, a Unitarian Universalist church. So we realized that, well, some of these buildings had activities in them, of course. They all kind of run in silos, and we didn't really have any coordinated activity coordinated through the town. These individual buildings or functions in these towns had events that ran in them. So the Cultural Council, in addressing our 3 assignments, are considering a council-funded project, a Day of Art and Culture, where we will have multiple tracks. We will bring together largely existing local programs, artists, and sites. We will target fund any gaps we have for a particular type of performing group that we feel is not represented very well, and put this on in the spring. The good thing about putting it on in the spring is a lot of these organizations or the buildings that I showed you have cultural events that take place as the summer and the fall progress. And we feel that we can jumpstart the season with those participating organizations. Here's just some of the groups that we're hoping to reach out to. The top 2 are professional music groups that happen to be based in Winchendon. We have our local library youth programs, the cultural center I mentioned, local dance studios, school groups, the art gallery I mentioned, and church choirs and keyboardists. So that's how we're hoping to tie that together and to showcase the cultural spaces you saw, as well as a few others not included on that slide. And it fits with our town motto, working together. And that's the close of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. It is so nice just to hear from another local cultural council, and I'm sure we have some local cultural council members on this meeting that are probably going to be inspired by what you just shared. So thank you. Yeah, so we do have maybe about 6 minutes for question and answer portion, and I think earlier on in the meeting, I think panelists, if you feel like you can answer this, from Roberta Rosenberg in Watertown. She shared, Watertown has a number of tech people taking over malls and other facilities for the exclusive use of new tech companies. Arts organizations are concerned about this development. What would you suggest we do to prioritize the arts and zoning and community development? And if attendees do have specific experiences with this type of conversation, feel free to put it in the chat. But I just wanted to open it to maybe Jay or G, if you have, or any of the panelists at all.
Sure. So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky stuff. So I'll start off by saying I think Greg Jenkins is on this call, and he's up to his eyeballs in working in Somerville with the new zoning sort of ordinances there, and then getting into the specifics of how that zoning complements and incentivizes the exact thing that you want, which is, artist workspaces, artist spaces in general. And if Greg, I'm not sure he can speak because he really is quite good at this. But I think he's there. I will say, just to start off, that you're sort of defining where you want to go as specifically and as clearly as you can before an advocacy effort or surveys, although surveys will help you define what is needed as far as the artist community in your area, and that can inform which direction you go in. But what can happen is if you're not sort of in the conversation as some changes with zoning start to occur, or at least are proposed, someone else is going to define the outcomes, right? Because maybe their idea of arts and creativity may not be exactly what you are, and their definition may be the very tech companies they're going in and I don't know if they're displacing, but they're just have resources to do these things. So that would be one bit of advice. So, Somerville's doing the risk assessment and sort of laying out the data so that so when you approach the regulatory bodies and the elected officials, you have a clear strategy going forward, because you've done your sort of SWOT analysis, right, of what the issue is, and then you're offering language and ideas based on your experience and the surveys of the artists in your community. Greg, I see you there. Do you?
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. I just put in the chat a link to the work with MAPC. I mean, and then somebody else, I think, I don't know who put this in. There was another link about the Arts Overlay District work that we did about 11 years ago, 12 years ago. So, yeah, I don't, to even have a conversation about this, I think it's so incredibly complex. I mean, in Somerville, we created an Arts Overlay District that was basically put into place right around the recession. What it was is it created an overlay, so if a developer wanted density bonuses, that if they received the density bonuses, then they had to have a 5% or 10% set aside for the arts. So from that, we were able to get 5 artist live work units in a 100 unit building over in Metro 9. We also tied, back in the days, this is before zoning changed a lot, but parking was a huge issue. So anything with arts related uses did not have to basically trigger a parking use, which also was an impediment. To get caught up in zoning is just, it's hours upon hours upon hours. And what I would recommend, there are a lot of, MAPC is helping us. They've got a toolkit that I would highly recommend. Jay, as our state resource, knows a lot as well. I'm happy to help talk to people offline here. Seattle's done some great work. There's an organization called CAST in San Francisco that's dealing with issues of gentrification and zoning. There's a host of resources out there. So,
can I provide a different, additional perspective on that as well? And I agree with Greg that zoning and the specific policy involved in some of these changes is complicated, and it takes more than the 5 minutes that we have right now. But one thing we're really pushing, and I've had conversations with Greg about this as well, is how do we build the advocacy of the community so that they can have these sort of more powerful conversation with the legislature. So, so the goal is not necessarily to win the fight right now, which obviously is part of the goal, but is how do you prepare your constituents and your community for the next fight and the fight after that. So to begin that conversation with your legislature to say, hey, this is why art matters to me. And to have those conversations now, as opposed to when something comes up and say, hey, I need this from you. So I think the solution is not necessarily about what we can do now, even though we're gonna try, but it's how can what we do now lead to a model and a mechanism that will help us further this work, because there is not going to be sort of simple solutions where we win this fight. And I'll even be a little bit more specific. So you get a zoning for a building, but a lot of the system is designed to prioritize businesses and as a driver for commerce. So if those mechanisms in place, businesses can always push back, and then that continues to fight. So our perspective as MASSCreative, our goal is how do we build the advocacy power of the neighborhoods, the communities, the cities, so that they can sustain this long-term fight. And beginning conversations and beginning to talk about these things and having a shared platform and shared ideas is not a great solution, but I feel like it's a necessary start.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I just wanted to do a quick time check. It is 4:01, so if you do need to leave, please do so. This recording is going to be available. However, I think there is one more question in the chat that I think is definitely useful from Diane Kilgore, Manchester, Massachusetts. Has a small cultural council with a few contributors. Can the panel recommend ways to promote the important mission of connecting the arts in general to the community at large? If anyone has any answers for Dan.
I could. Yeah, I think if you're a small community and you have many limitations on things, start with inventorying what you have, because it's when you really sit down and start looking at what's going on in your town, it's actually quite refreshing to make that list and realize there's a lot more than you think at first blush. And you can supplement with some modest funding for, again, specific groups or a cultural event that will tie it all together. So I start with your dance troupes, your schools, your art departments in your schools, your church choirs or musicians, and pull that all together. And when you're in a small town, there's a real heavy emphasis on family, and people will come out in droves if the youth is involved, if their youth is involved. And so I would start there.
Actually, I have a question for you, Jill. So you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that you were pleased to see the Cultural Council listed by the town as being part of the Master Planning Committee. And I was wondering if that was a complete surprise, or if you had been involved in any sort of conversations beforehand with any of the municipal departments or officials, or if it happened organically because the town knew of your role as a cultural council in supporting arts and culture for the greater community.
It was, yeah, thank you. It was broader than the cultural council. This is a very small town. We had a financial crisis about 5-6 years ago. The town was literally bankrupt and had to dig itself out, which it already has. And all the management was overthrown, and town under recalled. It was a real mess, and it was before my time here. So when I came here, this master plan was already well underway, and they realized, the folks working on it, and I joined that master plan committee rather late in its progress. But they realized that in order to get this stuff done, these 151 strategies, they were going to have to call on it being really a community effort and a town and committee effort. So not only is the Cultural Council being called upon to do things pretty much above and beyond what our typical activity was, every other committee in town is being called upon similarly.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess, I'm sorry, another part just quickly. And this went out for public comment. So people were not blindsided. This went out for public comment for a couple of months. People and the committee heads were all contacted and said, hey, this is coming down the road. You're listed in this plan. And we had, a number of them reply, but mostly positive, being excited on where we were going.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you to all our panelists, Matt, Nina, Jay, Miranda, G. This will be available for people. And if you do have any questions for any of the panelists, you can definitely reply directly. So that's it. Thank you.